unit, who was hogtied and raped multiple times throughout the night by his cellmate. The next day, he walked to the program office and reported it. The victim was a 17-year-old adult, and a 17-year-old in an adult prison. Trauma inflicted by institutional policies and actions. In addition to the more obvious physical trauma that has been discussed, institutional policies inflict more subtle forms of trauma that often goes unnoticed, yet still have profound implications on people's lives. Throwing away or hiding inmates' mail, taking away commissary privileges, or taking away visiting with family members compound to create a more subtle form of psychological trauma.
Part 2, Trauma Healing. Traumatic experiences affect everyone differently. Some individuals are more affected than others. Some people internalize their reactions, while others display their symptoms through externalized behaviors. Despite these differences, there are some common ways in which people react to trauma. This part explores some of the common symptoms of trauma and the benefits of practices that focus on healing trauma. Successful practices of trauma healing are a promising tool for breaking cycles of violence, thereby reducing crime, improving community safety, and healing lives. The preconditions for the implementation of such practices, however, stand in stark contrast to the conditions within prisons, rendering trauma healing impossible within the context of prisons. When people experience trauma, physiological changes occur, triggering what has been termed a fight or flight response in the brain. This in turn leads to a state of heightened arousal in the body, characterized by an increased heart rate and rapid breathing. Drawing from observations of animals in the wild, trauma experts explain that this response is designed to help us protect ourselves when we are in danger. When people are able to use these survival mechanisms to fight off a danger or to run away from it, we are generally able to process the traumatic experience in a healthy way. According to trauma expert Peter Levine, when people are unable to fight or flee from danger, such as in a situation where someone is trapped or is frozen by fear, trauma is more likely to have long-term effects. This experience is often analogized to stepping on the brakes and the accelerator at the same time, wreaking havoc on the brain and the body, and trapping traumatic energy within. Prison riots, for instance, occur under circumstances that almost ensure people will experience this frozen state, given that they are trapped within limited geographic boundaries with no options for escape. When trauma is trapped in the body, as in cases where people freeze, it can cause long-term emotional and behavioral issues. Some immediate responses to trauma include hyperarousal, dissociation or denial, and feelings of profound helplessness or immobility. Trauma can cause profound challenges to interpersonal relationships, to one's emotional state, and to one's general ability to function.
According to trauma expert Judith Herman, hyperarousal occurs when the human system of self-preservation seems to go into permanent alert. In a state of hyperarousal, the traumatized person startles easily, reacts irritably to small provocations, and sleeps poorly, in Herman's words. Upon my release from prison, I have experienced these symptoms. I feel the need to protect myself. For example, when someone walks towards me because I imagine that that person might stab me. I worry that someone might jump out of a car that drives past me and attack me. I am aware that my reactions to ordinary events are at times irrational. Yet I am instinctively on guard at all times. These symptoms have not overwhelmed me, but they are present nonetheless.
Symptoms of trauma can be generally divided into two categories, internal and external. Internal symptoms of trauma include substance abuse, eating disorders, flashbacks, mood swings, depression, anxiety, and physical ailments. Trauma can also trigger a cycle that ultimately leads a victim to become a victimizer due to unhealed wounds. External symptoms of trauma include domestic violence, child abuse, gang activity, and aggressive behavior. The good news is that people seem to have an innate capacity to heal from trauma. Unfortunately, such healing cannot occur while people are incarcerated. A growing body of literature discusses techniques for trauma healing that have brought about profound improvements in people's lives and in societies. Trauma healing generally incorporates a variety of practices, including mental, physical, and spiritual components. However, being in a safe place is a prerequisite to trauma healing. In his book entitled Trauma Healing, Peter Levine cautions people that prior to beginning the healing exercises that he describes, readers must first, quote, find a safe place. Similarly, Dr. Judith Herman explains that there are 3 primary stages for recovery from trauma. The first stage focuses almost exclusively on establishing safety. People cannot progress to the next stages of the healing process without first establishing a sense of safety. Given the inherent violence and danger facing people while they are incarcerated, creating this sense of safety is impossible within prisons. Due to the profound effects of trauma healing, an alternative social response to crime that allows for the creation of environments conducive to healing would likely yield better results than prisons. Violence creates more violence. Successful experiences with trauma healing provide hope for breaking cycles of violence. However, state-sponsored penal institutions simultaneously inflict violence while also creating conditions under which it is impossible for people to heal from the trauma they have experienced both prior to and during their incarceration. Therefore, it is critical for society to cultivate alternative justice paradigms that do not include prison in order to ultimately create healthier, safer, and more resilient people and communities.